Petyr Baelish, known to the world as Littlefinger, has always been one of the most fascinating and enigmatic figures in Game of Thrones. From the moment he appeared as the seemingly unassuming master of whispers in King's Landing, he was more than just a schemer. He was a force of intellect, patience, and relentless ambition. He moved through Westeros not with armies or swords, but with subtle manipulations, whispered secrets, and an uncanny ability to anticipate the desires and fears of those around him. His mind was his greatest weapon, and he wielded it with a precision that allowed him to climb from a relatively obscure background to a position of undeniable influence. Unlike many other characters in the series whose power relied on brute force or inherited status, Littlefinger's rise was fueled entirely by his cunning, making him unique in the landscape of Westeros. It is precisely this intelligence, patience, and careful orchestration of events that makes the question of whether he deserved a better ending so compelling. Littlefinger's story is one defined by obsession and ambition. From the very beginning, his fascination with Catelyn Stark shaped many of his early actions, driving his relentless pursuit of power and status. His longing was not only personal but political, and he understood that alliances, secrets, and timing could be leveraged to achieve both his emotional and strategic goals. He moved like a shadow through the halls of power, manipulating lords and ladies, kings and queens, and often orchestrating chaos from behind the scenes. What set him apart was not simply his ability to manipulate others but his extraordinary understanding of human nature. He recognized what drove people, what they feared, and what they desired, and he used this knowledge to engineer outcomes that consistently worked in his favor. He seemed untouchable because, for most of the series, he was always thinking 10 steps ahead, anticipating moves before others even realized a game was being played. The manner in which Littlefinger's end was executed, however, raises questions about whether it was truly fitting for such a complex character. When Sansa and Arya Stark finally cornered him in Winterfell, the scene was undeniably satisfying on a surface level. It was a moment of justice, a reckoning for the many betrayals and manipulations he had engineered against the Stark family. The culmination of years of plotting ended with the sisters asserting their power, finally outmaneuvering a man who had made a career out of outsmarting others. Yet, while emotionally gratifying for viewers who rooted for the Starks, the sequence itself was brief, almost clinical, and left little room to showcase the very intelligence that had made Littlefinger a threat for so long. A man whose life was defined by intricacy and strategy was removed in a manner that felt sudden, almost abrupt, as though the audience had been denied a chance to fully appreciate the stakes or the brilliance of his final moves. What makes this ending feel especially unsatisfying is that Littlefinger's downfall seems to hinge on a momentary arrogance, rather than a prolonged challenge or confrontation that would test his wits. Throughout the series, he had navigated courts, manipulated powerful figures, and orchestrated conflicts that reshaped entire regions, yet his failure at Winterfell is rooted in a single miscalculation, underestimating the intelligence and unity of the Stark sisters. Considering the meticulous strategist he was portrayed to be, this sudden oversight feels inconsistent with the careful, calculating man audiences had come to know. Littlefinger had always been a planner, someone who considered every angle and anticipated the moves of others. For his arc to conclude in such a direct, almost simplistic manner challenges the integrity of his characterization. It suggests that his end was not the result of a climactic battle of minds, but rather a narrative device to swiftly tie up a long-standing subplot. Moreover, the execution of his character's final moments provides little insight into his internal struggles or motivations. One of the most captivating aspects of Littlefinger throughout the series was the duality of his persona, a man who appeared charming, loyal, or harmless, yet who was constantly calculating, always several steps ahead. Viewers were offered glimpses into his psyche, into the reasoning that drove his ambition, and into the clever ways he justified morally ambiguous actions. Yet, in his last scene, these layers are stripped away almost immediately. He is accused, challenged, and condemned without the opportunity to demonstrate his characteristic manipulation or cunning. It is precisely this denial of a proper intellectual showdown that leaves many feeling that his end was unworthy, that the story missed an opportunity to honor a man whose identity was so tightly bound to strategy, deception, and foresight. Part of the fascination with Littlefinger lies in the breadth of his influence. His manipulations were not limited to isolated incidents. They reverberated across kingdoms, changing the fates of rulers, families, and armies alike. He sowed distrust and orchestrated events that would have long-term consequences, yet the series concludes his narrative so neatly that his potential as a schemer seems abruptly halted. For a character whose existence revolves around plotting and long-term planning, it feels almost jarring to have him removed before he could execute one final, decisive gambit. A fitting conclusion might have involved a tense, drawn-out battle of wits, where Littlefinger's intelligence was fully showcased, even as the Stark sisters ultimately prevailed. Such a confrontation would have honored the intellectual depth that made him both feared and admired, creating a final act as layered and complex as the character himself. While it is true that his death aligns with broader thematic elements of justice, accountability, and the triumph of wisdom over manipulation, the execution leaves room for debate. Sansa's decision to execute Littlefinger represents her evolution as a leader, her ability to recognize threats, and her growth in understanding the dynamics of power. It also provides a satisfying moral arc for viewers invested in the Starks, reinforcing that cunning and deceit, no matter how brilliant, have consequences. However, the swiftness of his downfall, combined with the absence of a final showcase of his intellect, leaves many wondering if the narrative sacrifice of a prolonged or more intricate conclusion undermined the weight of his character. Littlefinger was a man whose life was defined by games within games, yet he is denied the opportunity to play one last round, to demonstrate the full measure of his ingenuity before meeting justice. The manner of his demise also reflects a broader issue with the final seasons of Game of Thrones. Many fans have observed that the later episodes often favored expedient resolutions over deep character exploration. Characters with arcs developed over years were sometimes concluded with rapid or convenient resolutions, a trend that arguably affected Littlefinger's story most acutely. His careful plotting, meticulous understanding of human nature, and long-term schemes were compressed into a few minutes of on-screen resolution, leaving viewers with a sense of incompleteness. A more drawn-out confrontation or a layered exposure of his final manipulations could have maintained both narrative tension and character integrity, providing a denouement worthy of his role as one of Westeros' most brilliant strategists. Littlefinger's ending, then, is a blend of narrative justice and missed opportunity. On one hand, it serves the story, rewarding the Starks, satisfying the moral framework of the series, and providing closure to his many betrayals. On the other hand, it falls short of the grandeur and complexity that one might expect from a character whose life was defined by intelligence, foresight, and manipulation. A character so defined by plotting and scheming deserved a final act that would test him fully, perhaps through a more elaborate game of manipulation, a near-successful plot, or a clever twist that revealed his enduring cunning even in defeat. By ending his story swiftly, the series sacrificed an opportunity to honor the intellectual brilliance that made him so captivating. Ultimately, the discussion around Littlefinger's ending underscores the tension between thematic closure and character integrity. Some viewers argue that his sudden downfall is thematically appropriate, emphasizing that even the most calculating and ambitious figures can be undone by arrogance, misjudgment, or underestimating the resourcefulness of others. Others feel that a man who spent years manipulating kings, queens, and lords deserved a conclusion that matched the sophistication of his strategies. While Sansa and Arya's triumph delivers poetic justice and narrative closure, it does not fully celebrate the genius and intricacy that defined Littlefinger's character. His death resolves the plot and reinforces moral lessons, yet it leaves a lingering sense of incompletion, a question of what might have been if the writers had allowed his cunning one last, dramatic flourish. Petyr Baelish's story is a reminder that Game of Thrones was, at its heart, a tale of power, ambition, and consequence. Littlefinger embodied the danger and allure of intellect unbound by morality. His demise, while narratively tidy, leaves viewers imagining the possibilities of a more elaborate conclusion, a final chess match worthy of a master manipulator. His legacy is therefore twofold. He is remembered both for the intricate webs he wove and for the unresolved potential of his final act. In reflecting on his ending, it becomes clear that he was a character whose brilliance demanded a conclusion as cunning, layered, and unpredictable as the schemes he orchestrated throughout his life. The abruptness of his death may have served justice, but it also deprived audiences of the full spectacle of Littlefinger's mind in motion, leaving many to wonder if such a figure, so carefully built over years, deserved nothing less than a finale equal to his intelligence. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future content. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on all our latest uploads. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear what you think.